ES Audio.
From the Evening Standard in London, I'm Rochelle Travers, and this is The Leader.
Mr. Speaker, without government intervention, the increase in the price cap would leave the average household having to find an extra £693.
The day we've all been dreading. Ofgem has confirmed there'll be a £693 rise to the energy price cap, taking the new threshold to £1,971, an increase of 54%. The new changes will affect millions of households. But the Chancellor has offered a lifeline.
The actions I'm announcing today will provide to the vast majority of households just over half of that amount, £350. In total, the government is going to help around 28 million households this year. Taken together, this is a plan to help with the cost of living worth around £9 billion.
The energy price cap increase comes the same day the Bank of England announced that its benchmark interest rate will go up from 0.25% to 0.5%, making mortgages more expensive for many borrowers. This means millions of Londoners are now facing a shocking cost of living double whammy. Here to tell us more is our consumer business editor, Jonathan Prynn. So, lots happening today. Ofgem have announced an increase to the energy price cap of 54%. Was this to be expected?
It was. Most analysts had been forecasting a very significant rise on this sort of scale. I would say, if anything, it's slightly bigger, slightly worse than expected. I think most of the forecasts were around the sort of 1910 or 1920 level. In fact, what we've got is £1,971. So it's slightly worse. But yeah, the broad direction of travel we knew was coming.
And what are the key announcements that the Chancellor has made in terms of support?
So there's two main announcements that he's announced today to try and soften the blow of this incredible rise in energy bills, a totally unprecedented rise. So the first is a £200 rebate, effectively, to all electricity customers in the UK, 22 million, I think. They will get £200 off their bills in October to try and soften the blow as these increases come in, bearing in mind there's probably going to be another increase in the autumn. That has to be paid back by consumers at the rate of £40 a year over 5 years. So it's not a gift, it's not a grant, it's a loan effectively to energy consumers that does have to be paid back, but at least it softens the blow in year one and smooths out the increase in bills so it's not quite such a shock all in one go. And then the second one is, the second measure that he announced today is a £150 non-repayable rebate to go on council tax bills for bill payers in bands A to D, which covers about 80% of council tax payers in England. So between the two of them, most people will get £350 off their bills this year, which is great. Obviously, it's only about half the level of the increase that we've seen today, with more to come in October. So it's helpful, but it doesn't cover everything by any means.
There's also been the Bank of England interest rate decision today, hasn't there?
So the bank announced at noon today that its key interest rate will go up double, actually, from 0.25% to 0.5%, which will have a knock-on effect for anyone who's on a tracker or a variable mortgage. Most people are on fixed rates these days, so they don't see an instant impact on their monthly mortgage bills, but it will gradually flow through to affect anyone that's having to remortgage, who's coming off their fixed rates over the next few months and years. So so the two together, if you're a homeowner with paying electricity and gas bills, which virtually everyone is, of course, then this is a bad day.
And what does this all mean for people in London?
Well, London is affected in different ways by these two announcements. London house prices are by far the highest in the UK, roughly twice the price of average house prices around the country. So obviously mortgages are much higher as well. So any increase in mortgage rates disproportionately affects Londoners. On the flip side of that, London is in the south of the country, the warmer part of the country, and also in London, most homes are sort of smaller than average because a lot of people in London live in flats. Much higher proportion of people live in flats than elsewhere in the country. Flats are easier to heat. So bills in London, energy bills are generally lower. So the two things probably offset each other to some degree, but bearing in mind that we've got some other increases coming down the track that do affect Londoners disproportionately, in particular public transport, with Transport for London increasing their fares by as much, that we don't know yet, but possibly as much as 5% come March. So yeah, I mean, none of it is good news for Londoners. Anything that affects the cost of property is always bad news for Londoners.
There's also other issues on the horizon, with the national insurance increase in April and the cost of inflation going up. What's the situation like for people who are struggling with the cost of living at the moment?
It's pretty grim. The Bank of England have just said that the fall in real living standards as a result of all these measures, taxes and cost increases that you've just mentioned, the cumulative impact will be the biggest fall in real living standards that they've seen since they started measuring it in 1990. So in other words, worse than after the global financial crisis, which everyone thought was pretty terrible at the time. So yeah, the implications are very, very serious, very profound. The Bank of England has just slashed its growth forecast for the economy this year as well. So yeah, I think we're in for a very bumpy ride this year. Hopefully energy prices will start to ease going into 2023. Hopefully we won't have conflict in Europe, which would have another terrible impact on energy prices, apart from everything else. So yeah, we can just remain optimistic that after 2022, inflation starts to subside and real incomes will start to grow again.
And that's it from The Leader. This podcast is back tomorrow at 4 p.m.